Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So there are not many questions, but there's one question, which Nora put it forward for ask me about this. She said, "I'm wondering about why vipassana emphasizes not focusing or concentrating on the breath as the object, and instead on scanning the body. But we seem to mainly use the breath as the object. Maybe scanning the body is the larger object, so easier to focus on and ground us. Then focusing down to the breath concentrates your attention." So this is actually it's actually a very common question that people have. I wouldn't say that vipassana emphasizes not focusing on concentrating on the breath. But remember, vipassana, which is the oldest of all Buddhist meditation practices, is a very common term. It's a very general term. It's really not a very specific term. But because nowadays, in the last 20 years or so, or 30 years or so, a particular type of vipassana is being very popular throughout the world, and they have many meditation centers, and it's in the tradition of Mr. S.N. Goenka. So there is a lot of, I could say there is misunderstanding about this whole thing about vipassana. Is only that type is called vipassana meditation. No. Let me give you I think it's a very good example. I'm speaking English, and you speak English, and you speak English, and you speak English, and you speak English, and you definitely, with all these TV's little squares, you speak English. But sometimes I have a British accent. Sometimes I have an American accent. And Tissa and Mali has a Sri Lankan accent. And you have an Indian accent, right? You have a South African accent. But we are all speaking English. You see, we are all speaking English. So which one is English? Which one is the real English? Right? So there are actually many types of vipassana meditations, many techniques pertaining to the development of vipassana, okay? To the cultivation of vipassana. So there are actually many techniques, varies between whether focusing on breath more or focusing on breath less. And even using breath could be very different too. You know, some vipassana meditation centers, I'm not talking about the Goenka type. Some vipassana meditation centers, they use the breath as the object initially, until they actually develop a very strong absorption samadhi. Then they go on to develop insight. But before that, when they use the breath, they don't just use the natural breath. Some of them, they use forced breath, like really deep breath in, force. And one of my Dharma sister actually practiced that tradition. And so there, as I said just now, we are all speaking English, but yet we are speaking a little different type of English, right? A little bit different. because of our background, because of our nationality, because of how we were taught, how we learned that English. So do not misunderstand about only that type of vipassana is vipassana. Okay? That is a very common misunderstanding, especially among the S.N. Goenkaji's meditators. They think that only that type is vipassana meditation. Because why? Because they encountered that meditation. They encountered that meditation, but yet they don't explore about deeper into the Buddha's teachings. So sometimes they could really have that kind of misunderstanding. So vipassana is the oldest of the Buddha's meditation techniques. And the vipassana meditation, actually, this technique it actually comes directly from the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of meditations. So it is a direct but very thorough cultivation of both mindfulness and also concentration. So we need to understand that. And also vipassana meditation or Satipatthana meditation actually has a goal, has an object for us to start to really see the truth of impermanence and dissatisfactions or unsatisfactoriness. And then anatta, that means the selflessness of all phenomena. So let us look at what does it mean really by vipassana. So the whole thing of development of vipassana is called vipassana bhavana. Bhavana, of course, these two terms are Pali terms, right? The ancient Indian language. So bhavana means cultivation. Bhavana means cultivation, development. Okay? So the development of vipassana. So, and vipassana, what does it mean by vipassana? So vipassana is made up of 2 words, vi and passana. So passana means seeing or perceiving. Seeing not with the eyes, not just the eyes. You can, this seeing means penetrating. Okay, so and this seeing means is actually seeing or perceiving with this vi. So with this V, what does it mean? It means in a very special way. And this special way is into and through. That means it's penetrating, it's piercing. And this V, it has to have a set of complex connotations that can really, I can say, you can actually translated it into in a special way. Okay, so it means into and through or penetrate and piercing in a very special way. So what is that special way? What is that special way? That special way is the way it is. So so the whole meaning of looking into something with piercing, with into and through, that means it sees with clarity and precision. Clarity and precision. And seeing each component as very distinct and piercing all the way through to where? To see the most fundamental reality of that particular thing. So it's actually a very deep understanding Okay, so this process, this vipassana, bhavana, really lead you into developing a quality called insight. Okay, and this insight actually is insight into seeing the basic reality of whatever you are examining. So whether it's a breath, or whether it's the sensation, or whether it's the thought, or whether it's the truth of all existence, you actually grill it down to the basic, to the real last thing of that particular existence. So you can say that vipassana bhavana means the cultivation of this mind towards an aim of seeing in this very special way that leads to insight and full understanding about this thing that you are looking at. You are still with me? Okay. So with vipassana, I'm saying vipassana means vipassana. Like I'm speaking English, like I'm talking about English. Okay? Not one particular type of vipassana. Understand that, please. Okay? So with vipassana, one is actually cultivating two wonderful qualities. They go parallel together. And they are a team. One is mindfulness, and the other one is concentration. So you can say, or you can use words samatha and then vipassana, or samatha and sati. You can do that too. Okay, but mostly it's sati and concentration and samadhi. So these are very different qualities. They are different functions. Sati and samadhi, or mindfulness and concentration, are two very, very different functions. Okay. So with concentration, what it means is one-pointedness of the mind, very focused to one-pointedness. Just like some people use an analogy of using a lens. Using a lens, and when the sun shines through, and you put a piece of paper down there, then when the sun shines through at one focal point, you are able to burn through that paper. Yeah, right? But the lens itself is sati. The focus is samadhi, is concentration. You see? So it's one point, it stay in one point. You're not going anywhere. You stay there, stand there, right there. But mindfulness is a very, very delicate quality. It notices things. It doesn't need to be here. It doesn't need to be one-pointed. Okay, so it's just like an owl. We are just like an owl. If we are very mindful, we're just like an owl. The head can turn 360 and notices things. But it's not one-pointed. So it's sort of like a bigger, like scanner, like bigger space, right? So with mindfulness and concentration, they differ in here. So mindfulness picks the objects of attention and notices when the attention on that object starts to slip away, or whether it stays there. Right? But with concentration, it provides, when you're so concentrated, when you're so concentrated on one object, it provides that power. You keep that mind, because concentration gives you that power. So you can pin your mind on one particular spot. So some of you have taken this Goenka vipassana, and you are aware that when you practice a little bit more, he asks you to focus in one point to observe your breath. That means you try to actually develop concentration, develop this focused mind. Okay, so mindfulness and concentration, they really work hand in hand together. They are friends. They work as a team. But mind you, this concentration doesn't mean that it is any type of concentration. It is a wholesome concentration, the correct kind of concentration. It's the right samadhi. Okay? It's the sama samadhi. It's the correct kind of concentration. So, is there any incorrect kind of concentration? There is. Like people shooting guns. They are concentrated in shooting the target. That is an unwholesome concentration. That is not sama samadhi. That is just, it could be just samadhi. Okay, so the concentration alone, just having that concentration alone will not give you a perspective about yourself. Because it can throw a light to shine through and let you see about yourself, about your selfishness, about your arrogance, about your ego, or about the nature of sufferings. But with mindfulness, it can help you to go to that state, to go to that scope. So those of you who have taken the 16 steps, you should be able to remember when during the first 3 tetrads, we start to be mindful of the breath and gradually building up this concentration. But until step 11, remember, you are building up that concentration, that the mind starting to settle, and the mind become more concentrated. Then with the mind in the background helping you as an object so that you can always fall back onto you start to see how you are being tricked by your own mind. Because the mind starts to calm down, and the mindfulness become what? Brighter, like what I always said. You are actually below the ocean. All the waves are up above you, and you are sailing in a little bit lower than the waves. So you are actually able to see, oh, there are waves there. And those are the tricks. And then you started to develop this concentration, and then what is the 4th tetrad tells us to do? 13 to 16. What does it tell us to do? It tells us to dive into watching, understanding, experiencing impermanence. Right? So it's really not, you think it's just observing the breath? No, that's why the 16 steps is way, well, I could tell you this 4 foundations of meditation or satipatthana actually become a deeper or more advanced tool in the 16 steps in the Anapanasati. So you can see once you start to develop that mindfulness, very strong mindfulness, because it is as Nora, you pointed out, yes, it actually it's not just the vipassana, it's the mindfulness that is being developed in this vipassana technique, in this vipassana practice. It gives you this bigger scope, bigger span, and you'll be able to observe in a bigger perspective, wider perspective, right? So it can help us to really see the changes. We will be able to experience the changes within this object. And even though you in the Anapanasati, or even though in the quote vipassana practice that you mentioned, Nora, actually this truth of impermanence already exists right in the beginning of your practice. It's just that it doesn't, well, your mind is not so strong, and the investigative power is not strong. So the penetration and the piercing strength are not strong enough. And so the understanding of impermanence is very, very sporadic, very little. So that, because it's so weak and so sporadic, it doesn't give you the strength, really, that power to really say, oh, this is impermanence. And at that moment, yes, then you're able to let go of a little bit. Let go of a little bit of your own ego, of your own arrogance, of your own view. And then you are above the clouds. Otherwise, you are in the clouds. You are really like, or below the clouds. So understand this, and also remember, we cannot develop mindfulness by force or by suppression or by control or by struggle. You can't. But you can develop concentration by forcing yourself. Right? You stay here, so you stay here. So you all constantly grab yourself back here, right? That is actually, yes, force. Or some people, wanted to train themselves to sit 2 hours without moving, and so they struggle through the pain. So you can develop concentration by force, but not mindfulness. Okay, so with sati or mindfulness, we need to understand this needs to be cultivated by the right kind of effort and the right kind of energy. Energy doesn't mean the warmth, whatever. It's the right kind of effort. Okay, the energy that you put in, that means the effort you put in. And why do I choose the breath? Why do I choose the breath to develop that mindfulness, or to teach about developing this mindfulness? Because the breath is there, and the breath is a wonderful tool, and the breath can help you to really understand so much more. And also the breath also has sensations there, and also it has its own dharma there, and also the chitta is in there, the mind is in there. So the breath is a wonderful object. And also the breath is a source of energy. As I always say, the breath is the support behind the scene. We can always rely on the breath to get ourselves grounded. We can always rely on the breath to help us to settle down. But not by struggle, not by controlling, not by really, sometimes you really don't need to pull the breath back here or back anywhere. You don't. You just have to realize the breath is there, helping, supporting, and you sometimes you only need to pay like 30-40% attention to the breath, and it can help you tremendously to settle down. Okay, so the breath is such a great source of energy and effort. So allow the mind to continuously to fall back onto and to develop this mindfulness. So sati this mindfulness, this right kind of mindfulness is, of course, samasati that I'm talking about. So this samasati is actually, there is no ego in it. There's egolessness. If there is ego in it, there's not sati at all. It's not samasati at all. Okay? So with samasati, there is no me or mine or I in there. So there is selflessness in there. Okay? So it's a pure, I could say, it's a pure state of mindfulness. And when you are really just in that pure state of mindfulness, it can really give you a real perspective about yourself. Otherwise, it's really not true perspective. Okay, so it's actually not very easy to have that kind of mindfulness. But sometimes just a glimpse or just a momentary mindfulness is, wow, I'm such a whatever word you want to use, a J word, or whatever word you want to use. So it really allows you to take one crucial mental step backward from your own ego, from your own desires, from your own animosity, aversion, and look at that and said, wow, this is really who I am. This is really who I am. Of course, that is who you are at that moment. At that moment. But is there another you deep down? Of course there is. There is this wonderful pure qualities down there. But when you start to, these wonderful pure qualities down there can only surface when all these, oh, this is who I have been, really. No, I need to change. I need to correct this. I need to really, polish it down. Then it's possible that one day you may have a glimpse of that purity. But that needs a lot of work. Okay? So with this samasati, this mindfulness, the right kind of mindfulness that one develops, you start to see yourself as exactly as you are. And you will start to see your own selfishness. You start to see your own egoistic behavior. You start to see your own suffering. And you will start to see how you create that suffering. And you can continue to go in that way, or you can choose to back off from that direction. And that needs mindfulness, the right kind of mindfulness. And so mindfulness, this sati or samasati, is really, it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there, noticing, and looking, and simply looking, and not doing anything. So when you are actually in that mindfulness state, you're not doing anything. There's no you, no I, no me in there. So there is no desire, no aversion, no judgment, nothing in there. You're just being mindful. I tell you, it's a wonderful moment that you are when you're able to do that. You're so detached. You're so above the clouds. Everything is so clear. And you will not be hurt. You will not be disturbed. You will not be angry. You will not be depressed. You will not be anything. Because that mindfulness is so strong, it allows you to stay continuously being mindful. Because in mindfulness, in pure, clean, quiet, correct type of mindfulness, aversion, personal ego, arrogance doesn't exist at all. If any of those exist, that means there is not mindfulness. Okay? So mindfulness has a very broad and large function than concentration. So it is an encompassing all function. It has an encompassing all function in there. So I can use a very simple term is concentration is exclusive because it's one-pointedness. But mindfulness is inclusive, right? So we can see the difference between them. And concentration will lead you to, yes, peace and calm. You feel bliss, calmness. So that kind of calmness is actually very blissful. You feel sort of elated sometimes. But mindfulness helps us to really develop into this insight and starting to see this impermanence. And when one starts to see this impermanence, hopefully one will be able to detach a little bit more from its own view, on desires, on attachments, on egoistic reactive behavior. So mindfulness can make us free, whereas concentration make us more focused. And sometimes with just concentration, you can be less free. Because why? You start to attach to the blissful experience. So I hope that with this you understand a little bit more about mindfulness and concentration and about vipassana. So with mindfulness and concentration working together, it will result in insight and understanding. Okay, so Nora, with the vipassana that you are you have experience with, they do still use the breath, but they don't actually emphasize that much. So that 1/3 of the time they actually spend on observing the breath, and 2/3 of the time they spend on developing this sort of insight. But whereas I like to use the breath as the object, because even with the breath, we can still know what's going through the body, what's going on with the breath sensations or the body sensations, and we could still go through the understanding of the Dhamma and the citta, about the mind, with the breath. So that's why I myself really prefer using the breath, and that's why I teach using the breath. So mindfulness, sati, correct sati, the right kind of mindfulness, samasati, is really the center point of vipassana practice, which is being supported by samadhi. And in the Buddha's teachings is taught, in order to really enter the stream, like attaining the fruits, one does need a very strong absorption samadhi. Okay, so samadhi is necessary. But in vipassana, in Goenka type vipassana, they stress on momentary samadhi only. Okay, but in many other vipassana practices, they actually emphasize quite a bit on absorption samadhi. Okay, so I wish I have answered your questions, Nora. Good. Okay. So anybody has any question pertaining to this question? You understand a little bit more about? Not quite, but all right. No? You have question, Kwok? You look doubtful. Okay? So, no? All right. You do? Okay. All right. So, because actually there are not many questions that's being sent into for Dharma sharing, I thought, I'm not stressing you guys out to give me questions. But if you do have questions, please do send them in. I will still answer them. I will still, we will still explore your questions during Dharma sharing sessions, each monthly session. But I have, because as I said, I don't want to stress you folks out for providing me any questions. And I don't want to dig into any questions myself because my questions is not your question. So, so I thought, starting from next Dharma sharing class, which is a month away, I'm going to teach Dhammapada again. But this time I teach Dhammapada in a different way. I know some of you, actually, a few of you actually haven't attended the English Dhammapada class, which I did many years ago. I don't know how many years ago. 10 years maybe?
At least it was before we moved here. So.
Oh yeah. So at that time, we studied Dhammapada verse by verse. So, but this time, I'm not going to study Dhammapada verse by verse. I'm going to actually compile a few categories of it's a category, a few subjects, I could say. Whatever, I don't know how to. Themes? Okay, themes, maybe, yeah, themes from all these verses. And so I may not be able to finish one theme in one session, but I will, I will try to ask you to read those verses first beforehand, then we can discuss that theme, that particular theme. I think that would be more interesting because in Dhammapada, there are actually many repetitions in Dhammapada. And it spans over the whole book, whole sutta. So, so that's why I think this time I will change to actually use a few themes, maybe 5, maybe 6. I haven't really, finished the compilation yet. I'm working on it. Oh, that's why we couldn't start tonight. I'm working on it. But I'm going to give you a little very brief introduction to Dhammapada, the Dhammapada, what does it mean? So Dhammapada is a very, very popular literature. And so popular, it becomes actually a world religious classic. And even non-Buddhists actually love the verses of Dhammapada because they are just like poems. Okay, and Dhammapada, all the verses in Dhammapada were composed in the very ancient Pali language, and it constitutes a very, very perfect compendium of the Buddha's teachings. It really encompasses a lot of Buddha's teachings in there. So, according to the Theravadan tradition, each verse in the Dhammapada was originally spoken by the Buddha in response to a particular situation, a life situation, okay, in the Buddha's time. So the teachings are very clear, very direct, and it actually inspires humility and reflection. So it so much that it could become a really practical instructions. Okay. And the Dhammapada is being collected in the minor collection in the Nikaya, Kandaka Nikaya, in that one, if you want to look it up. So the Dhammapada that I'm teaching, or I'll be using to teach, is the Theravadan tradition, not the northern tradition, the Chinese tradition. I'm using the Theravadan tradition, the southern tradition. And it has 26 chapters and 423 verses. And the version that I'm going to use is the translation by Bhikkhu Buddharakkhita. If you want to actually acquire an English version, you can actually order it online. But there are there are actually many different versions, translations. But I find this translation slightly better than the former translation that I've been using. So this time I'll be using Acharya Buddharakkhita translation, but you don't need to use his translation. I'll be putting those verses on the slides anyway. So in the verses of Dhammapada, in all these 423 verses of Dhammapada, you can actually, I don't know about you, but when I read through it all the time, I really start to feel the teachings, the Buddha, the heart of the Buddha is really crystallized into his teachings. And those wisdom just flows into those verses. So I think each verse is really a profound teaching on how a right kind of living. Okay, so this I'll be using this, and the Buddha has actually pointed out that whoever earnestly practices the teachings will taste the bliss of liberation. And I think whoever earnestly practices what Dhammapada teach will be able to taste the flavor of liberation. And as I shared with you many weeks ago, that when we gave the book to the inmates at the prison, and one of the inmates the next week he said, if I would have practiced what the Dhammapada taught, I would be such a good person. I will become a better person. So, yeah, and so, it's really a wonderful, wonderful book. So, Dhammapada has been translated into many, many languages, and you can really see it online. Spanish, French, Turkish, German, Sinhalese, many. So tonight I'm going to give you a very short introduction about the word Dhammapada. So Dhamma, that means teachings of the Buddha, or the truth, or fair and correct. Anything that is fair and correct. And phenomenon. So phenomenon, that means the truth of existence. Any phenomenon that you can see the truth behind of its existence. That's Dhamma. So do not narrow down your vision of seeing the Dhamma as just the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha is actually teaching about the truth, about fairness, correct, and about the truth pertaining to the existence of all phenomena. Right? So that is Dhamma. So what is Pada? What does Pada means? Pada means path, footprints. Or Pada means poems, gatha. Okay? So Dhammapada, that means the poems of Dhamma. Gatha, about Dhamma. Or the path of Dhamma. The path of practicing Dhamma. Or the path to understand the truth. Or a correct and fair path. Or a path that tells you the truth pertaining to the existence of all phenomena. So that's the meaning of Dhammapada. Okay? So Dhammapada, if you say the footprints of Dhamma, that means if we follow these footprints, we will be able to reach the same goal as these footprints have been walking towards. Right? So if we are actually following Dhammapada, if we are actually using Dhammapada as our motto, like way to practice, way to live our life, we are actually following the footprints of our Buddha, right? So aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky? Aren't we fortunate, right? So, but of course, because Dhammapada, all these verses are being passed down through oral tradition. And you could say, with oral tradition, there could be mistakes, right? Especially, for example, if you ask me to pass down something to you orally, today I may be able to remember fully, but maybe next week I will probably forget half of it. Then if I pass it down to you, I probably pass down to you like half correct, half wrong. Then you pass it down. Maybe you also half correct, half wrong. How much that would be left? 25%? Is that right? Or less? So there could be, there could be mistakes, or there could be whatever, So we just have to be very wise when we look at these verses. And remember, when we study in the Buddha's words, the Buddha actually taught us how to choose teachers, right? So you remember that in the Buddha's word, which chapter? Chapter 3 or chapter 4? I can't remember. How to choose teachers. So when you read these verses, you should know how to choose the right kind of verses too, right? So I want to share with you this. Sorry, I put down the Chinese first. So one day, let us read this. Better it is to live one day seeing the water white heron than to live 100 years without ever seeing the water white heron. Okay, so one day Ananda was walking around. Ananda, after the Buddha has gone into Nibbana, Ananda was in the bamboo grove, and he heard some bhikkhus were reciting this verse. Better it is to live one day seeing seeing the water white heron than to live 100 years without ever seeing it. And he said, this is wrong. This is not right, bhikkhu. And the bhikkhu said, no, this is what my teacher taught me. Of course, the Buddha was not there anymore, right? The Buddha was in Nibbana, went into Nibbana. And another said, no, this is wrong. This is not what the Buddha taught. This is what the Buddha taught. So it's the next one. It's verse 113. It says, better it is to live one day, seeing the rise and fall of things, than to live 100 years without ever seeing the rise and fall of things. So it's a very different verse, very, very different verse. Of course, when we are reading it in English or in Chinese, it's how can that mistakes be made? But remember, these verses are in Pali, and the Pali terms is very minute difference between the two words. Okay? So Ananda said, bhikkhu, you're wrong. This is what the Buddha has taught, and this is what I heard. Better it is to live one day seeing the rise and fall of things than to live 100 years without ever seeing it. So the bhikkhu, and Ananda suggested the bhikkhu to go back to his teacher. And so the bhikkhu went back to the teacher and asked the teacher. He said, well, Venerable Ananda said this. This is what he taught us. He said, this is what the Buddha taught, not the one that you taught us. And the teacher said, oh, don't believe in Ananda. Ananda is old. Ananda memory is going. He mistaken this. He is wrong. So don't believe in Ananda. Believe in me. So Bhikkhu went back to Ananda and said, my teacher said that you're old. You're getting old. You're losing your memory. We should not believe in you. So honest, right? One good quality, being so honest. But Ananda was so sad. He was so sad. He said, oh, it's so sad. All my good friends like Sariputra, Mahakassapa, Mohammadananda, they all went into Nibbana. The Buddha all went into Nibbana, leaving Ananda behind. And Ananda actually encountered such a challenging situation in this. And he felt so sad. He said, I better go into Nibbana. And in what was recorded, that really Ananda went into Nibbana. But I don't know. I don't know about how true that is, but it really doesn't matter. But you can see how hurtful it could be if you read, if you were Ananda and you heard what the Buddha taught, but yet people crooked the meaning, right? So you can see how hurtful that could become. So this is why I wanted to actually go back into the Dhammapada. So I won't force you to give me questions first, and secondly, we can actually have a new perspective of how to study the Dhammapada. Okay? It's all good? May these blessings extend to all, that we with all the other living beings together will attain the Buddha way. May more and more people will encounter the wise words of the Buddha, study them, understand them, and practice them to help themselves to be liberated from their own entanglements, sufferings, and be truly, ultimately free, happy, and peaceful.